Hello, my name is Milorad, and today I'm going to be discussing a middle-aged man, the changes from Dominions 5 to Dominions 6, as well as new considerations for new spells, maybe some old spells that have new significance, and some of the new blesses. This is not intended to be a complete national overview or explaining to you, the meta or how to play middle-aged man. This is more like a comparison. So first we're going to talk about the economy, then the units, mages, summons, and then go into the magic. I'm going to try to keep this a little bit shorter than my previous videos, just because some of that is kind of repetitive at this point. So okay, let's go right into it. First, with the economy, they have no special scales modifying the way that some other nations do. But of course, now they can only do 2 order and 2 productivity, which does matter. The new knight is very expensive in recruitment points. So if you go neutral order, you can usually only make 5 knights. With order 2, you can usually make 7. With order 1, perhaps 7 by the middle game if you have a population growth in your capital. You only have, you can see here, these are your pretenders. You only have 2 pretenders that give you +1 order. This one and yes, the Celestial Lion. And then you only have 1 that gives you productivity, which is this one. Only 1 that gives you +1 magic, and lots of options for +1 growth, and no for luck. So, order, as we discussed, is the most important, not just because of the knights, but also, you don't have a lot of units with a significant disparity between order and resources and recruitment points. High production, in my opinion, is less important because really the only things that have like a significant ratio between the two will be like him, 24 versus 16, or this one. Like, for example, the knights require lots of resources, but you're more likely to be gatekeeping by the recruitment points. And then a lot of the other units, like for example this one and like this, they're pretty close. Okay, so I don't think there's reason to go productivity 3, but I definitely think you should go order 2 if you intend to make a lot of the new Knight of Avalon. Okay, so that's really all I had to say about production, or sorry, economy. Okay, now let's move on to the units. We're going to talk about the ones that have changed or have like new thoughts you may want to consider in Dominion 6. So the Slinger, this was not a very good unit, but now the Sling is half scaling, just like the bow, so he does more damage. And now, keep in mind that it's now 25% to the head before armor is deducted, instead of 50% after armor is deducted. So this means, now he can defeat some like smaller helmets with the Sling. The other consideration for this unit is that you can now point buff 1 square with flaming arrows. So like a Logrian wise man, if he has a fire random, he can spend a gem or use a fire in a jar to get Phoenix power, and then he can point buff these. And this will be like very early game because it's only enchantment 2. So it does give you a way to get flaming arrows, and gives maybe slingers slingers some more usefulness. Excuse me. Okay, Longbow Man got a big change. So not only is it half scaling on the bow, his strength was increased from 11 to 12. So now he does 15 damage, which is almost as high as a Bandar or Dai Bakemono, which both do 16. But this one is much cheaper than both of those. And he has a better precision than both of those, especially the Bandar. But the other consideration is, because bows are now more damaging against lower protection units than they were in Dominions 5, you have to consider that they're even more vulnerable now to the return fire because they have such a low protection, only 5 in a body. Okay, so then Spearman, Long Spear, and Tower Guard, they all got to increase in their move speed. So this went from 14 to 16. This one went from 12 to 14. And this one went from 12 to 14. The reason that's important is now they will not slow down armies of longbows and knights if you need blockers. For example, because this is 14 map move and this is 14 map move. So now you can have these like medium infantry blockers without slowing down your army. As far as I can tell, this Logrian warrior has been unchanged, and so has the landless knight, so we're not going to really talk about them. Forrester, he, unlike a lot of the other troops, did not get the buff to the move speed. So this is still a slow unit unless he's in a forest. He now has a better bow strength because of change to half scaling, but he's vulnerable, to return fire because he doesn't have great armor. Another consideration is in Dominions 5, one of the commanders had more precision more patrol for the gold than 4 of these, which because in Dominions 5 the commander was 40 and 4 of these was 48, and the commander had more patrol than 4 of these. However, now because the commander costs more, 4 of these have more patrol than commander, so it's more cost effective to use these for patrolling than the commander if you're going to use them that way. Okay, the Logrian cavalry got changed because he lost his javelin, but now the horse has a hoof. I think in almost every way this is superior because you weren't really going to use a javelin that much on a cavalry, and it gives him an additional attack, especially when he's flanking. He went up 5 gold, probably to account for the fact that the horse gives additional hit points to the combined hybrid unit. But you have to consider the horse has very low protection, so only 8 on a body, and it will die very quickly to arrows, and then he will be on foot and be limited to 1 attack. I would say it's still an improvement from Dominions 5 because this is your second fastest cavalry, because he's faster than the knight. So they can be used for flanking, especially like in an early game. Okay, so the knight, he got a significant change in my opinion, because so now he's 45 gold instead of 40, 58 resources instead of 51, and 45 instead of 41 from Dominions 5. So they are more expensive to make. However, the horse in this case has a very high protection on the body and the head. So remember, when missiles attack, it's 50% of the time they hit the horse, and then in a melee there's a formula based on reach, but essentially reach is like the length of your weapon plus your size. But without going too much into the math, some of the attacks will hit the horse and some will hit the rider. And we talked about this with other cavalry. If the horse is poorly armored, that's bad because the horse will die quickly and then even if the rider survives the battle, he has to walk back to his home province to get another mount. In this case, the horse has an excellent protection, even more body protection than the knight. So the horse will absorb some of the attacks, and it really increases longevity of this unit until you have magic that will target specifically the mount, right? So this has a very bad MR. In Dominions 5, this was 1 unit, and it had 10 MR, and now you have the horse is vulnerable to attacks that target, have an MR check. However, especially in the beginning half of the game, these units are excellent. Okay, so the warden, poor warden. Let's talk first how he changed, what the positives are. Okay, so he got +3 to his health points. He got 1 additional attack, 1 additional magic resistance, and he got True Sight, which lets him, negate enemies that have some glamour buffs. Now, although this is a across-the-board buff from Dominions 5, you have to consider that this is not enough to really save him in comparison to the new Knight of Avalon Sacred. That doesn't mean you will never make him. I have a multiplayer game that's now like approaching turn 50, and there were cases I did build these. So I built them, for example, when I had to take on Monolith on a capital, because they do so much more damage than the knight, unless you give a knight the strength, unless you buff their strength. But you can also buff his strength, and he accepts the strength buffs better because it's a two-handed weapon. And of course, if they're stealthy like they were in Dominions 5, so there's still reason to make these. But oh yeah, and the other consideration is sometimes you would have not enough resource points to make enough knights, so instead you would make these, because you can make almost 2 of these for 1 Knight of Avalon in recruitment points. However, this is now the star of the show. So from both my multiplayer game and all the testing I did, I can say this is probably, top 5 Sacred in Middle Age. He's not as good, of course, as like Movark or some of the other ones, but this is an excellent unit. It's a significant improvement from Dominions 5. Obviously he's Sacred, but let's talk about some of the other changes too. So, they're much more expensive. It's now 90 gold versus 60, 66 resources versus 56, and 60 recruitment points versus 48. So you're paying for it, but it's a lot better. He got 5 poison resistance and 100% 100 disease resistance. So this matters especially middle age if you're fighting Tzitis, because they have that miasma domain that causes disease, right? Then, of course, of course, there were no mounts in Dominions 5, so it's hard to compare. But, you still have the magic weapon, and the unicorn has other traits that are valuable. So, has a very high MR for an animal, so it's not as vulnerable to the attacks that hit the animal. Also, he can accept, now the buffs that target animals in the nature ones in Thaumaturgy. So he also has poison resistance and disease resistance, but he has even more, 10. Now, the other thing that's important to talk about with this unit is Smart Mount 100. So what I discovered from playing, well into like middle game, or the beginning of the late game, is that when you lose these, because they're not invincible, you will lose them. You're more likely to lose the knight than the unicorn, because the unicorn has extremely high protection and lots of HP, right? So you're much more likely to lose the knight. The unicorn will likely escape the battle because it has high speed and has, you know, good protection, good HP. And because of this smart mount tag, they will always try to go back to the capital, and they have to pass an easy MR, but easy morale check, but they already have a high morale. So what I ended up finding was you have very good, a very low attrition on a total unit. You end up having, like, it was not uncommon for me to see like 12, 13, 14 units that are available for half price to repurchase in the capital after like big fights where I would lose, you know, like a dozen or so of these, because then they would all go back to the capital. It was very rare that they would get lost along the way. So this is additional consideration for your opponent, to make sure that they have to kill the whole unit. The other way this matters is if you have an event or a throne or something that reduces your order on your capital. This is a way to make a bunch of these if you normally would not have been able to with your recruitment points if they were new. Because, you know, the new one is 60, but if you have the mount go back to the capital, it's half price. So then you could maybe make 8, 9 of these if you have enough holy points, you know, to make them. Whereas you would not be able to make new ones at that price, because even with order 2, you likely would not have enough recruitment points. So this is just a consideration about that. You know, we'll talk more about this when we go to the blesses at a later part, but I just want to move on from that for now. Okay, so the commanders, this one, like, unfortunately, he's more gold than he was in Dominions 5, and like lots of units, lots of commanders got to increase in a leadership, but he didn't. So now, like, he costs more gold but doesn't have more leadership and doesn't have more patrol strength. So like, he's not really as useful as he was in Dominions 5, but there's still reason for use him. This one, Castellan, the only comment I have about him is you have to consider now that his map move is slower than most of the other troops. So because he's wearing a heavier armor. So what that means is the commander will slow down the army if you use these to lead. He will slow down if you have longbows and other medium infantry as well as the knights. So you may want to consider giving him the construction 1 boots in nature, which will increase his map move, I believe, by 6. So you may want to do that if you're going to intend to use these to move around troops. Monk is unchanged except for his price. However, if you compare how much a Holy One priest now costs, this is still like not much of a increase compared to the generic one. He did get this icon, which just kind of lets people know that it's not affected by drain or magic. This is helpful for new players because it was not abundantly clear in Dominions 5 that they were not affected if you did not play the game. Okay, so Bard, he is now Glamour 1 instead of Nature 1. I think this is much better than it was in Dominions 5, because, you know, Glamour has point buffs that he can do at Glamour 1, even outside of a chorus. He can also spam, you know, Warrior Illusions, which was a former air spell, but now is under Glamour. So he has stuff to do even outside of a communion, or outside of a chorus. But the other consideration is it's not common to have a pure Glamour mage with no cross paths. There's not very many, even if you consider every age and every nation. Most Glamour mages have a cross path. Sometimes you want a pure mage in one school or one magic type, so they can do big spells in that type, right? So, in a chorus and with Twilight, it's not unusual for these to reach 3 to 4 glamour, and then they can reliably do big glamour spells, which is especially important when they go off script. Because if you have a crosspath, the AI may do stuff you don't want them to do, whereas if they have, one path only, he will do stuff that the others may not. So, you may look at this and say it's objectively worse than the Daughter of Avalon, but I disagree, because sometimes you want only glamour when you're going off script. The other consideration is, I did this very rarely in Dominions 5, but you can do like a reverse chorus. So basically, the difference between a chorus and a communion, many of you already know, is that when he hits 100 fatigue, the chorus slaves fall out of the chorus. And then they will carry on with their next thing in their script, right? So you could put these on chorus slave and then do attack. And what you could do is have a way more chorus masters and have only 2 of these be slaves. And then you completely overload the chorus quickly in order for them to drop out. And then when they recover from their fatigue, they can be completely buffed with, for example, displacement, regeneration, iron skin, stuff like that, where then when they pop out of the chorus, they immediately go attack. Now, you could do this, of course, in Dominions 5, but I think it's better in Dominions 6 because of the new glamour spells that make it really increase their survivability. It's better if you're going to do this. I'm not saying necessarily that I recommend it in many cases, but if you're going to do this, it's better to use it with the Bard because he has better base stats than this one, for example, which has worse base stats and worse health points. Okay, and one more thing about the Bard is if you make a research booster, the glamour one, the Dreamstone, he can carry it as a glamour mage, even if you take a Undreaming Bless on your sacreds, because then Daughter of Avalon cannot carry it because she will have an Undreaming, and then she cannot carry the Dreamstone. Okay, Daughter of Avalon used to be 1 nature with a random 100% either nature or air. Now is always 1 nature, 1 glamour. This is more consistent paths, obviously. However, you can't get as high now in nature base on this. Okay, Mother of Avalon got a significant buff because in Dominions 5, she was 1 nature, 100% random nature and air. You had two of those opportunities, and then you had 1 more 20% random for water or earth. But now you are base 1 nature, 1 glamour. Then you have a 1 nature, 1 glamour random, and then you have 100% water, earth, or nature. So what this means is you are guaranteed 4 paths instead of only 20% of the time 4 paths in Dominions 5. It is less likely that she will be nature 3. However, you have now a 66% chance to get either water or earth, as opposed to an only 1 in 10 chance or 1 in 5 chance of getting either. So a better way to say it is you have a 1 in 3 chance of being water or earth versus a 1 in 10 chance of being either of those. This is important because both earth and water are useful to introduce into a chorus. So it's better, in my opinion, that you have a higher chance of water and earth than it is to have a higher chance to have 3 nature. This one is unchanged except for that he has a true sight if you want to thug. This one Knight Commander is essentially a copy of the unit, except he has slightly higher stats if you want to thug. The Crone is the most significant change of the mages, in my opinion. You know, it used to be 2 air, 3 nature, with 100% random in air, water, earth, or nature. Now it is 2 glamour, 3 nature, with 100% random, the same like before, but also with the glamour. So what this means is it dilutes the random, so you're less likely now to have nature 4. You only have a 20% chance versus a 25% chance, which is important if you want to give her a Thistle Wand so she can make a Mother Oak. The loss of an air is very significant. You know, you used to be 3 air, a nation that could do 3 air, but now you are limited to 1. This is very, you know, impactful. However, you're getting potentially 3 glamour. So you're basically trading glamour or trading air for glamour as this nation, and we'll go more into that when we get into the spells. The 3 glamour is the most important random besides the nature, because it allows you to make the glamour veil at the Conjuration or Construction 5, so you can make a booster. I should go back to this one real quick. You want to make sure you hold on to one of these that has a 2 glamour and 1 earth randoms, because then she can wear the earth boots and the glamour hat to make the mirage crystal, which is the additional booster. Okay, Lograrian Wise Mage, he has been unchanged. The consideration though is that the fire is more valuable as a random, because with a gem or a fire in a jar, you know, he can Phoenix power to be fire 2, and there's now, you know, new buffs in fire that did not exist in Dominions 5 that he can point buff. The air is also probably more important because it was kind of redundant in Dominions 5 because you had so much air, unless you needed the air earth cross path for forging. But now the only other option you have to have air is 1 in 5 on a Crone. So now if you want to search air, you need to do it really with him, because you're going to have more of these, because you can make them in any province. So, you know, that's sometimes important if you want air income. Okay, we're going to go over now the summons. So these are these 3 already existed. Unicorn is new. So this is an unarmored version of what the knight is riding. You know, what's important in this one compared to the knight is it's stealthy. I mean, the other one is stealthy as well, the mount, but that's not relevant because the horse is not, the rider is not stealthy, but these are. The other important significant difference is that this one does not have any protection or any armor, so he has very low protection. But we're going to talk more about how you may want to use this when we go to the blesses. This is 10 glamour for 10 of these, whereas the Sudsite, I don't know how you pronounce that, these are cheaper. Now it's 14. Is it 14? No, hold on. No, 10 for 5. So essentially the difference between these is that you know, this one is 2 for 1 and this is 1 for 1 in terms of summoning for glamour. Okay. Okay, now we're going to talk about the heroes before we go into the magic. Okay, we're going to only talk about the ones that have really changed. Okay, the Green Knight, he has better armor now than he did in Dominions 5. He has magic armor, but unfortunately he does not have a magic weapon. And he's riding a unicorn, which also has a magic armor. Okay, so the blind one exchanges his heir or her heir for the glamour. So this gives you a glamour astral crosspath that you do not have access to otherwise on this nation. The other one is this one, Cambion. He exchanges his 2 water for 2 glamour. So, and now he is the highest heir on your nation without a pretender. So if you want to make higher heir items, you still need the pretender to make a booster. However, he can make some of the lower level heir items if you want to, if you end up getting him. And then the Fae, she exchanges her 3 heir for 3 glamour. So if you were to get really bad rolls on your crone, and because only 1 in 5 is 3 glamour, if you get this, she has a minimum arrival of turn 10. But if you do get her and you're getting really bad rolls on your crone and you don't have a god that can make a glamour veil, the booster, then she can make it. Okay, so now we're gonna go into spells. I'm gonna go school by school, but I'm gonna keep this shorter than some of my previous videos because some of these I've already talked about at length. So we're gonna try to go a little bit quicker. I'm only gonna talk about some new spells and existing spells that have new significance for this version of Middle-Aged Man. Okay, so under Conjuration, we already talked about this briefly, but these used to be summoned, the dogs, with nature, but now they're being summoned with glamour. The reason this is important is if you're going to use these troops, you're going to free up nature to make other things such as a research booster that's new. If you decide to use the dogs. This is the new spell, Herd of Unicorns. Keep in mind it can only be made in forests. The Fae, we talked a lot about this in some of my other videos. This is a way to get troops with a magic weapon. However, this is less relevant to Middle-Aged Man because your Sacred Knights all have a magic weapon on the mount. If you're going to use these, it may be worth going cold versus hot because the cold troops are better because they have a cold power. The other consideration is that the Fae Prince in cold will give you access to Glamour Death as opposed to the Summer one, which doesn't give you anything special compared to the cold one. However, keep in mind that even if you get the cold Prince and he gets a Glamour Death, he cannot add death to a chorus because he's not a spell singer and he cannot add himself to the chorus. That's important to consider. Summon Sprites is very powerful that all of your Daughters of Avalon can do even outside of a chorus. It only costs 1 Glamour Gem and you get Sprites and they have 20 shots each that do the fatigue. The other one to consider is that you have a Cave Kobold. So only 1 in 3 on average of your mothers can cast these if they get to Earth. So then they can make these to assist you with sieges. And then of course you have stealthy mages already, like a bard or the mothers that can move these around to do siege strength. If you have 1 in 3 of your mothers can also cast Water Kobold, and this gives you Selling Commander. Okay, Strength of Gaia. In Dominions 5, this was very uncommon that you would get to cast this because only 1 in 10 of your mothers would have Earth Random. Now it's as high as 1 in 3. So this means that you can pretty consistently have one of your Chorus Masters be a Earth and cast this to give even higher nature to your Chorus. Okay, under Alteration, again, I'm not going to talk every spell. I'm just going to highlight a couple. You know, Twilight is very important for your nation because it boosts Chorus, and it affects everyone, you know, including the Chorus slaves, which means they take even less fatigue from the Chorus on top of, you know, already taking less fatigue because they are a spell singer. I think Nightfall has less relevance to middle-aged man. You would rather keep a Twilight up because the only troops that have a dark vision are the dogs, the Sudsidhe. They have 50% dark vision. It's probably not worth it. It's probably better to keep up a Twilight. Blood Poisoning is something you can do offensively with a high Earth, especially with the Chorus, because they can cast this many times inside the Chorus without fatiguing out. And this is, you know, very high. It's armor negating, poison damage, 100 precision. So, you know, with the loss of air, you don't have a way to do the precision buffs under air unless you put a 1 in 5 air random crone into the Chorus. Like, yes, you can do that, but it's easier to do Eagle Eye Warriors because, you know, all of your well, the majority of your Chorus will have access to nature, and they can do this instead to give precision to your archers because you're probably going to have a lot of longbows. If you intend to use the backwards Chorus that I talked about earlier with the bards, right, or really anybody who's a spell singer, you may want to consider Invisible, because this is a caster effect, so this will affect all the Chorus slaves, and this gives an Unseen. You know, this will be a -10 to the roll of the attacker if they don't have a True Sight or Spirit Sight. And then earlier, you know, this does not stack, but earlier you have Displace Body. Even if you don't intend to use your Chorus slaves to fight after they fall out of the Chorus, this is also useful in case your in case you get oh, I apologize. In case your Chorus slaves get flanked, it might be useful to have invisibility on them because it will make it less likely that they will die before other troops can rescue them. If you go very high, on your Pretender in Glamour, you can cast Eternal Twilight, like with a booster, for example. This is amazing with your choruses because then you don't have to worry about casting Twilight. What I found is because, you know, the spell singers cast slower, I found that I was using a Glamour 2 Mother with a hat to make her Glamour 3 and using her to cast Twilight outside of a chorus on turn 1, because it's faster than waiting for the chorus to get boosted and then cast that all the way on round 2.5 because of the way, how slow the choruses are. With Eternal Twilight, if you get this in the later game, you don't have to worry about that, because then every battle will have a Twilight up already. Okay, so under Evocation, Warrior Illusion is something you can do very early game. Bards can do it, Daughter of Avalon, everybody can do it even outside of a chorus, and this just creates, tons of ethereal chaff. The ones that are probably the most important under Evocation, the ones that I use the most in my game, would be like Ephemeral Blast. So, this is a great spell for a bard who is a communion chorus master, especially if Twilight is up, because then you don't have to worry about the crosspass, and he can semi-reliably do this even off script. So this is scaling, so like damage increases by 2 for every additional path or every additional level. So you could also have, for example, a mother who has a Glamour 2. If she is a master and Twilight is up, she could conceivably have Glamour 5. And then she's doing an additional 4 damage. This would be 11 armor negating. Now obviously this is magic resistant negates, but has a very wide AoE, and it's a very powerful spell, especially if you have a way to make penetration boosters. It also might be a reason to take Arcane Finesse on a Bless if you're going to be using Sacred Chorus Masters as opposed to a Bard. Okay, Poison Cloud is so like air nature is now not as common, especially this high. If you get 1 in 5 of your crones is air, she can cast this. This is a very powerful spell. Now, do you want to risk a crone that's only 1 in 5 random in combat just to cast this? I don't know, probably not, but the couple times I did use this, I found it to be very powerful, especially now that poison causes debuffs. Wailing Winds is the most important in this tree, because you had no access to this in Dominions 5 because it was a Death Air spell. Now it is Glamour Air, and if you get the 1 in 5 air randoms on the crone in a chorus, or if she's wearing a Glamour hat to boost herself, then she can cast this with 3 gems. 1 to boost and then 2 for the payment of the spell. She doesn't need the booster if she's going to be in a chorus. The other important consideration is that, because of how a chorus operates, this will not slaughter the, chorus slaves who are going to be all off path, because they will drop out like the turn after this is cast, after boosting the crone. So, you could have 2 bards or 2 Daughters of Avalon with 1 crone to boost her up to the path necessary to cast this. And then you don't have to worry about them dying the way you would if they were in a communion. Okay. So the reason I want to talk about construction is not for the spells, but for the items, that, especially the research boosters. Because we already talked about the path boosters. So, in Dominions 5, you would typically build a quill to put on a monk who's researching, because, they're not affected by drain or magic, but they can still carry the items. So, you can still, of course, make a quill, but now you're not an air nation, really. You don't have an innate air magic or income, and you only have it on 1 in 4 Logrian wise men and 1 in 5 Kron. So it's less viable to use quills. However, there are new boosters to consider. So you have Dreamstone, but, and this is easy to make, it's very cheap. You get a lot of research for the gem. However, it can only be used by glamour mages. So if you're going to make these, you're going to have to put them on a bard or Daughter of Avalon. Daughter of Avalon is probably better because she's sacred. So the upkeep is less. If you want to make a booster for your monks, you're going to need to do it in nature. This is new. Homunculus, I don't know how you say it. This has a very bad research to gem ratio. It's not good. However, if you have a high nature income, so for example, if you were to cast Mother Oak, keep in mind that you have less use now for nature versus glamour. You know, most of your gems will be spent on glamour summons versus nature summons. So this might be a reason to make instead these, especially if you can get a hammer. Like, you know, if you have a Logrian wise man who randoms earth, he can make a boots, make a hammer, and then you're making these for 8. It's a little bit easier to swallow, and you can put this on your monks even if they you know, because they can wear this even if they're not affected by magic and drain. That actually reminds me, I need to go back to Conjuration for a second. So it's true that in most cases you would rather spend your nature gems, or you're going to spend most of your gems in Conjuration for glamour. However, Manticore got changed from Dominions 5. This was only summoning 1 per turn or per cast. This now does 3. Manticore is a very powerful flying monster with the fear, and also has a tail that throws poison barbs that do strong damage, strong poison. So if you get a mother that does 2 nature, random, and 1 earth, she can wear a boots and cast these. And this is actually a very good use, in my opinion, for your nature gems if you're going to use it for Conjuration, because it gives you a flying high health point fear monster that's very mage turn efficient. Okay, okay, so I was already done really with the construction research discussion. So I'm going to move on to enchantment. Enchantment, you know, we talked about it briefly before, but if you have a 1 in 4 Wiseman who's fire, he can boost himself up with Phoenix power with the gem or fire in a jar to be fire 2, and then he can point buff fire arrows on either longbowman or somebody else, which you really couldn't do in Dominions 5 because flaming arrows was fire 4. You also have the poison. Poison bows are pretty good, less so on the slingers. This will be very easy to you to do, point buff, and then you have the higher version. This is, you know, for lots of nations, you're not going to have easy access to 3 nature, but you do easily with the chorus, or, you know, 1 in 3 of, well, it's not 1 in 3, but some of your mothers will have 3 nature. Another important spell in here is group regeneration. This is like a lower AoE, but does not cost the gems, to give regeneration to your troops. So this is especially valuable on Knights of Avalon. Like because the mount has 27 health points. You know, this may be a reason to do Blood Bond, or to get, you know, additional, let's say 4 HP on your Bless, because that would give them a new regeneration bracket. uh, another consideration is that foul vapors is, in Dominions 5, you would usually have to cast it with a Crone of Avalon, because it was rare to get only 1 in 10 of your mothers would have water. However, now 1 in 3 will have water. And then especially in a chorus, it's going to be easy to cast foul vapors if you want to do that. It also makes it easier to cast Gaia's Blessing. I did not get to this point in my game yet, but this was hard to cast in Dominions 5 because only 1 in 4 of the crones would have this, or 1 in 10 mothers, but now it's more common for you to have Earth. Okay, moving on to Thaumaturgy. Chorus is now moved from nature to glamour, and the other important difference is that chorus can no longer interact with communion. So in Dominion 6, so you cannot make a matrix to introduce other paths. It needs to be a glamour mage with Spellsinger. And I looked in a mod inspector. It does not appear that there are any generic indie or summon mages with the Spellsinger. So you're really going to be limited to the ones you already have. So that means you cannot make a matrix to introduce fire, or for example with your Logrian wise men or air. So that's important to consider. Beast Fury, and then the other ones that are higher, like Ferocity, Pack Ferocity, and then this one. These spells give a new use to your sacred dogs, that you can cast, that you can summon, as well as the unicorn, because they're all animals. They have an animal tag, and this will boost their attack and morale, and it will give unicorns especially will give them 13 attack. It's also useful on a mounts. With the Battle Fury, if you boost the Logrian Wiseman, he can cast this to boost the attack on the Knight, on the Rider, and then a Nature Mage can cast Beast Fury to boost the attack of the Mount. So this is a way to point buff attack on both the Rider and the Animal Mount. Luck is important in this school as well, because in Dominions 5 it was Astral, and you do not have access to Astral in your nation. Now you have a way to cast Luck. Keep in mind, however, that because Spellsinger is slow, I found that point buffing Luck with, like, let's say a Bard is less efficient, because he can only cast maybe like 1 or 2 before the troops run off, because of how slow he is with the Spellsinger. You're better off, in my opinion, casting Group Luck. Group Luck is especially valuable on a Unicorn summon, because it has such a low protection, as well as the Sacred Dogs. Like, if you give them a Bless, let's say like Dread, they need survivability, and this is a way to give luck to them without having to take it on your Bless. It's also useful on the Longbowmen, because they'll stand still and they're very vulnerable to return fire from arrows, and then this will give them a way to stay alive with the luck. Vision of Death is a very powerful spell, because it's armor negating 25 damage. It's like a Mind Burn, but much lower range. It has higher damage, but this is a good thing to do because if you get the high glamour in your chorus, and you need to target elites or like a thug. The other important one is Sandman Blessing. So, this is hard to cast for most glamour nations because you're never going to have, or you're going to rarely have a high glamour on the battlefield. Like 5 is very hard to reach. But because you have a chorus, this is feasible. Because it would, let's say you have a glamour 2 on the Mother of Avalon base. And then if she has 4 communion slaves and Twilight, now she is glamour 5 without even needing to wear a booster. If she wears a booster, you can do it without Twilight or with fewer communion slaves. This spell is very powerful because it has a huge area of effect. Sleep spell. However, consider that this may also target your troops. You might want to give Undreaming on a Bless if you're going to be using lots of Sacred Summons and the Knights. However, then keep in mind, if you do Undreaming, of course, you cannot use the Dreamstone magic booster on the Sacred Mages. So Beckoning got changed. In Dominions 5, it was 5. It was 5 nature. So now it's 4 glamour and 2 nature, and this is much less accessible to most nations, but you can still do it. Because more nations have nature than have glamour and nature cross paths. If you have a 3 glamour crone, she can wear a veil and then cast this. And this is very powerful on low MR units in the forest. And conceivably, you could have more forest, especially in middle age, if you have a Asphodel, creating forest everywhere, or other nations with high growth because of terraforming. And then let's see if I have anything else. Oh yeah, Charm. Obviously you had access to this in Dominions 5 as well. But because it got changed to glamour, it made it less accessible to more nations, but you can still do it. And then Gates of Horn and Ivory is the gem generator. So you may want to go down Thaumaturgy as your first target for a level 7 because it has the gem booster, or has the gem sight, and it has lots of valuable spells along the way. Okay, so let's go now to blesses. Okay, so I'm only going to talk about the new blesses really because there's too much to talk about otherwise. I want to talk about what I think synergizes very well with your new sacred. Okay. So this is just a sample build. Let's ignore this. Let's go to the whole list. Okay. So awareness is a valuable new bless because it essentially makes your sacred cavalry like they were in Dominions 5, where they only take like a half penalty from harassment because they have unsurroundable 2. But it's even more than that because don't forget you have a mount and rider in the same square, and part of the time the mount will be targeted and part of the time the rider will be targeted. So awareness is very powerful on a Knight of Avalon, especially if it is paired with other blesses. So if you pair it with slowing weapons, for example, you have 3 attacks on a Sacred Cavalry. So the enemy would have to pass 3. So slowing weapons does not require damage. It has, if you're hit, you have to do a MR check against 15. Now you will have 3 attacks. So it's very likely it will apply at some point, slowing to your enemy. And then they are attacking every other turn if they have a slow for the rest of the battle. And then this will pair even better with awareness because then you're getting attacked less often. So you're getting even less harassment. Awareness also pairs well with displacement, because in displacement, will make a -5 on the roll for enemy attack, so they're less likely to hit you and they're less likely to harass you down. This also is better to put as a bless than blur, because it's easier for you to buff blur with your glamour mages than it is to buff displacement on your troops. Dread is an interesting bless, because you have on your Sacred Cavalry, it has a double effect from both the mount and a rider, because don't forget, both of them are sacred. For the sacred dogs or the unicorns, if they have a dread, they can be used as like a fear cannon if you can find a way to keep them alive. So if you were to do, let's say, group luck on the unicorn or the sacred dogs, it's a way to keep them alive, to give the dread time to work. So this will give more use to them. Speaking of them, they're also then useful to do slowing weapons, because then you can toss, for example, a bunch of dogs ahead of your army, because they're fairly disposable, because you get 2 for every 1 glamour gem. And then if they don't have to really stay alive very long, but they can apply slowing weapons to the enemy that they hit. They don't have to do any damage. Same with the unicorn, and it's even more valuable if you can keep them alive. Another valuable spell might be Obfuscate. A lot of your sacreds are already stealthy, but this will also make your knights sacred and a Daughter of Avalon who is not stealthy. So this will make the knights stealthy and the Daughter of Avalon stealthy. So you could have an all stealthy army if you wanted to. But it's kind of redundant because a lot of your other mages already have it. Heroism got debuffed or got nerfed in 6.08. So now it's only plus 35% instead of plus 50. However, I still believe it's valuable on this nation. With 2 stars on a knight, with the 2 heroism for the knights, it's not uncommon for them to have 2 to 3 stars by the end of expansion. And this is especially valuable because they have a recuperation built into both the horse and the rider. It also helps passively boost the research of your monks over time, because they don't get help from a research scales or magic scales, but they do get a +1 research from each star on their of experience. So if you have 3 heroism, they will basically get 100%. It's more than 100%, but on average, it's essentially they will gain experience twice as quickly. So then, when they reach 15 by turn 7, approximately by turn 8, they will reach 15 experience points and get 1 additional research point, I believe, if my math is correct. You could also consider vampiric weapons, because you have 3 attacks on a sacred knight of Avalon, and it will help keep them alive, especially the mount, who has 27 HP and has 2 attacks by itself. However, this is a pretty expensive bless, and you would have to probably take, with Blood 8, you would probably have to take the Fountain of Blood, but then this one has a Turmoil, so you would only be able to take Order 1, which then will limit your ability to make a lot of the Knights of Avalon, because they require so many recruitment points. Okay. I'm sure there's other blesses, but those are kind of the ones I was looking at that are new. If you have any additional comments or corrections, please make them in the comments. And thank you very much for watching my video.